Alright, hello everyone and welcome to the channel. Today we're going to talk about light vehicles. This is kind of my sequel to the video I made a few months ago, is Gaijin running out of tanks. In this one I'm going to attack and focus on light vehicles. Now light vehicles are easier and cheaper to produce than tanks on average, so there's a lot more to choose from here. However, there are some nations in War Thunder that are still going to struggle due to the fact that there's just not much to pick from. So it really depends on which nation you're talking about. For some, yes, we are very close to the end. Alright, some ROE before we get started here. I couldn't list all light vehicles. I know there's always some experimental unicorn that Gaijin can pull out of the closet. So I picked some interesting vehicles that I think the player base is most interested in. I play mostly top tier, so these vehicles are newer and will probably start somewhere around 8.7, if we're looking at implementation here. So I want you to understand this list is not all inclusive. Alright, before we get started on the main content, I feel like there's something I have to say. I shouldn't have to talk about it because it should be self-evident. But as I always say in these videos, these are all strictly my opinions. No one else's, just mine. I know it comes with the territory being a content creator, but sometimes in the comments, it's just like, what? I think I get accused literally of having an opinion. That's what this stuff is. So hopefully you all will enjoy this video, but I'm all for constructive criticism in the comments and debate. That's what this is all about. I love doing that. So maybe we just try to keep it there. All right, let's jump in. All right, so we're going to start with the US first, and the first up is the General Dynamics Ground Systems Mobile Protected Firepower. Kind of a weird name. Hopefully they evolve that when the vehicle gets a little bit further along. So the U.S. Army says this is not a tank, but it is the first light tank that the U.S. Army has procured in 50 years. It's based off the Griffin II prototype design with that 105mm gun. It uses a fire control system from the Abrams, and the turret looks like it may also be a little bit from the Abrams without all the armor, of course. The initial contract is for 96 vehicle, and this mobile protected firepower is supposed to enhance infantry brigades. So there are other vehicles from General Dynamics in the Griffin family using that chassis, and I know there's a technology demonstrator with a 120mm gun, and there's also another Griffin with a 50mm gun that's supposed to be the replacement for the Bradley infantry fighting vehicle. The Bradley's getting a little bit long in the tooth, so it'll be good to see that get replaced. Rounding out the light vehicles for the US is the M1134 Striker TOW, which is a long-range anti-tank missile carrier. It fires the TOW-2 heavy anti-tank guided missile. Next up we have the Striker 30mm Dragoon, which is a Striker combat vehicle with an unmanned medium caliber turret. That's what they call it, an MCT-30, 30 being for the 30mm gun. So next up is the Lynx, which could be in the German and the US tech tree. Reason why I put it over here is because the Lynx KF-41 proposal was submitted by Rheinmetall Land Systems to the U.S. Army, and it bid to replace the Bradley infantry fighting vehicle. So the Lynx has an autocannon, a 30mm or 35mm caliber. It's got all types of good ammunition, which allows this vehicle to engage targets up to 3,000 meters, so pretty good. It can also mount an optional anti-tank guided missile launcher. We're talking about spikes here, so Spike LR anti-tank guided missiles, which would be quite lethal for this. Alright, last vehicle I'll talk about for the US is the Lynx 120 fire support variant, which is armed with a, of course, 120mm smoothbore cannon from Rheinmetall, and it's capable of firing lots of different kinds of rounds here. So as you can see, lots of potential here for the US tech tree when it comes to light vehicles. Also lots I probably didn't even mention. So Gaijin has a lot to work with here as far as material. Alright, so the next country up on the list here is Germany, and we're going to talk about the Boxer first. So there is a plethora of versions of the Boxer out in lots of different countries. Lithuania, Australia, Germany, and I believe the Netherlands have also purchased the Boxers. So this is made by Artec GmbH, but Rheinmetall is a like a 64%, according to Wikipedia at least, owner in Artec GmbH. So firmly a German vehicle, except for Germany has not ordered any combat versions of this vehicle from what I could find. Australia, however, has ordered the combat reconnaissance variant, which is, just a development of the baseline Boxer to fulfill the Australian Land 400 Phase 2 requirement. So the Boxer will come equipped with a 30mm gun and the Spike LR2, which is, the 5th generation ATGM fire and forget missile. So eventually when this does come to the game, whatever nation it's going to, whether it be Germany or some other nation, because it's an Australian vehicle, maybe America, a lot of people will be mad at that. But this would be a very powerful vehicle indeed, along with the Puma IFV, which is in the game, which at some point should also get the Spike LR. Alright, next real quickly is the links again for Germany. I won't go into any detail because I already detailed this vehicle in the US tech tree, but suffice to say that the links could also find a home in the German tech tree. Alright, next up for Germany is the Marder 1A5 and the A5A1. So the A5 just having some anti-mine armor upgrades, but the A5A1 is a little bit more interesting. It comes with a jammer for IED protection and also multispectral camouflage. So a pretty nice addition, I think, for Germany. Now Gaijin will probably never put IEDs in the game, but I do think the multispectral camouflage mechanic should be coming sometime soon. Now the last one for Germany that I found here that's pretty interesting is the Marder 2 prototype. So I didn't even know this existed, but apparently in 1991 the Marder 2 prototype was around, and at that time it was considered one of the most advanced infantry fighting vehicles in the world. For armament, it comes with a 35 or 50mm gun and pretty conventional armor, but from the research it looks like a lot of what they discovered, because ultimately they did not field this vehicle, especially with the reunification of Germany, the Berlin Wall coming down. It was considered not needed. But the Puma IFV benefited a lot from the early work on the Marder 2 prototype. Alright, so the next nation up that I'm going to talk about is Great Britain. And I'm talking about the Ajax and two specific variants. The first one is the Overwatch Brimstone anti-tank guided variant. Now I don't have a picture of that, but the launch platform goes on top of the Ares that you see in the picture there. Now the Overwatch's Brimstone missile is going to be pretty sophisticated. It's a fire and forget missile, millimeter wave and laser guided. So really nice, and it'll be a good counter to at least the spikes when they come into the game. Alright, so the other version of the Ajax that Britain will get is the turreted version that has a 40mm cased telescoped armament system gun, which sounds pretty sophisticated. It's also capable of smart fires, so a couple of different rounds there. An airburst round, which I'm looking at here, looks to be pretty cool. Maybe Gaijin could make those mechanics happen in the game, who knows. But these two Ajaxes will be exceptionally good for British top tier. Alright, so the next vehicle up is the Warrior, and there's three here that I'm going to talk about. The first one is the Desert Warrior, which is, of course, adapted for desert operations. Kuwait operated this version. It has a different turret. It's a stabilized gun based on the LAV 25 wheeled infantry fighting vehicles, so a 25mm Bushmaster, what it has. And it also has tow ATGMs. So Kuwait purchased these back in the 90s, bought about 250. So I'd love to see this one in the game. Alright, the next little Warrior here is the Warrior 2000. This one was developed for the Swiss Army, although it didn't enter production. It featured an all aluminum hull, increased armor protection, it had a digital fire control system, and a more powerful engine. It also featured the same Delco turret that the Desert Warrior had, over from the LAV 25. But this one, the Warrior 2000, had a 30mm gun. Alright, the last Warrior here for Britain is the Warrior Capability Sustainment Program, just called the CSP. So what this added was a modular protection system, so a little bit better armor, a new turret, a new weapon system as well. They got rid of that old Rodden cannon. We all know that one, the unstabilized cannon, is just frustrating. So they got rid of that. They got rid of that manually loaded 3-round clip burst gun. and it was replaced by a stabilized 40mm gun. So hopefully we'll see the Warrior CSP in the game. I would love to play that one instead of the one that's here right now. Alright, so the next nation up is China, and they look to have some pretty interesting light vehicles. The first one we'll talk about here is the Type 15 or VT5 light tank. The VT5 being the export variant. Now this is equipped with a fully stabilized 105mm gun, which fires lots of different types of ammunition, including ATGMs. This tank is in about the 30 plus ton range, about 33 tons. So, you know, very light when we're talking about tanks. So the armor is going to be not like a main battle tank. So we're talking about passive composite armor or explosive reactive armor or cage armor in some areas. Lots of different levels of armor can be equipped to the Type 15. So this is a pretty modern light tank designed from the outset to be rapidly deployed. So its mobility is the key. It can be airdropped in, mainly to support infantry operations. And going back to the firepower real quick, its 105mm gun can accept NATO standard ammunition, so it's ready to go for the export market. Alright, next up is the ZBD-04 Chinese infantry fighting vehicle. Looks a little bit like the BMP-3. Its main armament is that semi-automatic 100mm gun, which, you know, can fire some ATGMs, HE frag rounds, but it also has the 30mm gun fitted coaxially. It can also be fitted with the HJ-8 wire-guided anti-tank missile on both sides of the turret, kind of like the BMP-3M. So there's a couple of different versions of this vehicle. There's the ZBD-97 prototype, which of course came before this. There's the baseline version I described. Then there's the one with the HJ-8s mounted on the turret. There's also the ZBD-04A with improved armor over the frontal arc and some add-on armor plates. And then finally there is a berserker version, which is the ZBD-04A anti-tank. Now this version is a missile carrier, obviously, but it can carry the HJ-10 Red Arrow anti-tank guided missile. Now this is a pretty modern and capable missile. It's radar guided and fiber optic guided, and it can defeat explosive reactive armor. So definitely top tier worthy. Now next up is the Type 8. Now this vehicle is from an 8-wheeled amphibious family developed by Norenco for infantry fire support and battlefield logistics and quick reaction operations. So like I said, a family of vehicles, but the one we are interested in is the ZBL-8 infantry fighting vehicle, which comes standard with a 30mm autocannon and 2 HJ-73C ATGM rails on either side of the turret. Now the next one up is the Norenco QSL-92, which is an ATGM carrier carrying the HJ-9 Red Arrow, which is a 3rd generation anti-tank guided missile. Now, when I saw this, I was like, Mephisto, is that you? I mean, this looks like a straight copy of the Mephisto, but, you know, it is what it is. So it has a 360-degree traversable mounting, giving it, you know, all the angles just like the Mephisto. And, you know, run-of-the-mill ATGM carrier. Probably be a good addition. Alright, the last vehicle that I'll go over for China is the ZBD-2000, which is exclusively used by the People's Liberation Army Marine Corps. Now, this looks very much like a BMP. It comes with, the basic version comes with a 30mm gun and anti-tank guided missile on the top of the turret. There's also a light tank variant of this, which comes with a short-barreled 105mm gun. Okay, so the next nation up is Japan, and, you know, of course, Japan doesn't have a whole lot to add. Hopefully Gaijin will, you know, find some kind of solution to the Japanese tech tree in the future, whether it be adding another nation, like a minor nation to the tech tree, you know, kind of like the British South African situation. But, you know, we'll see what comes with that. The first vehicle that I'm going to talk about, though, is the Type 96 multi-purpose missile system. Now, the missile on this vehicle is pretty large. It's designed to destroy landing craft and other small boats in some kind of amphibious assault scenario. So the missile's large. Needless to say, it will destroy a tank quite easily. Now this is a fiber optic guided missile with over a 10-kilometer range. So it's a non-line of sight weapon as well. So pretty strong here. It has the potential to be quite good for Japan at top tier. Alright, so the next vehicle I'm going to talk about is really in two parts. Really, it's the missile. It's the Type 1 Lamont, which is a fire frigate missile. So again, pretty strong, a la Spike. So really, this thing can be mounted on a lot of vehicles, but it is mounted on the Komatsu light armored vehicle, which is a pretty highly mobile vehicle with a guy sticking out of the hatch with the launcher on it. So nothing new for War Thunder. We can handle those type of graphics and mechanics in the game for something like this. Be a really good, fast missile carrier for Japan at top tier. Now the last one for Japan is a variant of the Type 16 maneuver combat vehicle. People keep telling me there's other variants of this vehicle. I've been looking really hard, and I've found some scant information that there are three follow-ons of the Type 16 that are coming. One is based off one is an infantry combat vehicle, and another one is a reconnaissance combat vehicle, and then there's some kind of command and control vehicle. So the one that I'd be talking about to come to the game would be the infantry combat vehicle. I don't really have more information on it yet, like what it's armed with and what kind of systems it will have. Just know that there is a variant of the Type 16 that is an infantry combat vehicle that we could conceivably get one day in the game for Japan. Alright, next up is Italy, and I always like talking about Italy and Japan because their lines are so small, they get very few vehicles added, but when they do, they usually get something good. So the main entree here is the Freccia infantry fighting vehicle, and it comes in a couple of different versions here. The baseline version has a 25mm gun, then there is a anti-tank version which still retains the 25mm autocannon, but it also has Spike LR anti-tank guided missiles, which would be pretty good. It's going to have dual anti-tank missile launchers. So very nice there. There's also another version of the Freccia called the Freccia EVO. I don't know much about this one at all, except for it comes as a combat version with a remote turret, so no one in the turret, but it has a 30mm autocannon. And still there's another version of the EVO, which is a reconnaissance version, which comes with the 30mm autocannon, but it also has a sensor mass. So really looking forward to something like that in the game. A reconnaissance vehicle with a enhanced sensor suite. Those mechanics are very fascinating for me. I'd like to see them in War Thunder in some kind of way. Alright, so next up is France, one of my favorite nations to play in the game, and the first vehicle is the Jaguar EBRC. Now this vehicle, I mean, it looks amazing. It's fitted with a two-man turret, has a 40mm gun, which is quite sophisticated, and the EBRC is supposed to replace a lot of vehicles in the French army. You know, the VCAC with the hot missiles, some VABs, the AMX-10 RC, the ERC-90. So it's gonna pretty much get rid of a whole lot of older vehicles, and it comes to Jaguar. But that's not it. So I want to make it a point that the gun on this is stabilized, because a lot of those French light vehicles had unstabilized guns. So boom, there you go. And there's more. The Jaguar has a medium range missile called the Missile Moyenne Portée. My French is probably not correct there, but it is a fire and forget missile, so yet another fire and forget ATGM that could possibly be coming into War Thunder. Alright, so the next vehicle up here is the Nexter Renault VBCI 8x8. So this vehicle has a 25mm cannon, you know, standard gun there. But there's other versions of the VBCI which can include a 40mm gun, a 90mm gun, or a 105mm gun. So lots of different possibilities for the game, especially when it comes to the Nexter Renault VBCI. Now the next vehicle up is the Panhard VBL, and how could I forget this one? This vehicle is ubiquitous. It is everywhere, and there's lots of different versions that Gaijin could put in the game. You know, we have the VBL Milan anti-tank guided missile variant. There's one with the Mistral missile, you know, if we're talking about anti-air there. There's the VBL TOW, which is an export version, but it carries the TOW missile. There are lots of different versions here that can be actually pretty fun to add into the game, because this is a highly mobile vehicle. Now the next vehicle up is the AMX-10. Now we already have the AMX-10 RC, the wheeled variant, for reconnaissance in the game. But there are other versions of the AMX-10 which are all tracked. So the standard production model being the AMX-10P with a 20mm gun. I'm surprised we haven't seen other versions of the AMX-10 in the game yet, because Gaijin could absolutely go ham with it. I mean, there's the AMX-10P Hot with hot anti-tank missiles. There's an AMX-10P Pac 90 with a 90mm gun. So lots of possibilities here for that vehicle for France. Alright, so the next nation that we're going to crack into is Sweden, and I'm going to go and put the Patria AMV, or Advanced Modular Vehicle, here. Lots of different nations using this vehicle, including Finland, but the main version of this vehicle comes with a 30mm cannon. It's fully amphibious. There's also an ATGM carrier version. There's also a version with a 105mm gun, and crazy enough, the UAE uses a version of the Patria that's modified and the chassis, and it is fitted with a BMP-3 turret. So really unique there. Would love to see the Patria in the game. Next up, and the last vehicle I'll talk about for Sweden is one we all know and love, and that's the CV90, this time the Mark IV. Now this is a 5th generation version of the CV90 infantry fighting vehicle. This one can be armed with a 2-man turret or an unmanned weapon station. It can have a 30 or a 40mm gun, a 35 or a 50mm automatic cannon, or even up to a 120mm smoothbore tank cannon. You can also be fitted with the Spike LR, and crazy enough, you can also fit laser weapons, if developed, onto the 5th gen CV90. So another excellent series of vehicles in the CV90 family that we could see in the Swedish tech tree. Now the next nation I'm going to cover is Israel here, and the first vehicle I'm going to go over is the Pura. Not exactly a light vehicle, but not a tank. Now this was, this existence of this vehicle was, like steeped in mystery for a long time, and it was declassified in June 2015, but it was hidden in plain view based on a Magach 5 tank hull. It actually wasn't a tank, it was a missile carrier carrying 12 Spike missiles. So 12 Spike non-line of sight missiles that are capable of fire and forget and man in the loop modes. So, this thing can reach out to 16 kilometers. Highly OP right now for the game, carrying that many Spike missiles. I don't know, when, if ever, Gaijin would introduce it. Probably find some way to dumb it down if it ever did come to the game. But here it is. Alright, so the last vehicle I'll talk about for Israel is the Eton armored fighting vehicle. More of a traditional wheeled armored fighting vehicle. This will come with an Iron Fist active protection system, and in later versions it'll be armed with either a 30 or 40mm gun and a missile firing position. So a nice armored vehicle alternative for the Israeli tech tree. Alright, so I know the video is getting kind of long, but the last up here is the Russian tech tree, and if you're still hanging out with me, I really appreciate it. So it's a lot of vehicles in this tree, so I'm going to go and get through them. The first up is the Kurganets 25. Now that's a tracked 25-ton modular infantry fighting vehicle to replace some of the BMP-2s. This vehicle features the Boomerang remote control turret with a 30mm autocannon. It also features 2 Coronet EM anti-tank guided missiles on either side of the turret. The Kurganets 25 has pretty good survivability. It features a 360-degree coverage active protection system, so pretty good that it has an APS. Now that was just the baseline version of the Kurganets 25. Follow-on versions of this vehicle will be a self-propelled anti-aircraft gun with a 57mm autocannon, and there's another version which is going to have a 125mm gun. So lots of variants of this vehicle for Gaijin to play with. Alright, so next up is the T-15 Armata, which is a heavy infantry fighting vehicle in the 40-ton plus category. So a beast here we're talking about. The T-15 also features a remote control boomerang turret. It also has its engine situated in front of the vehicle. The platform's primary armament is supposed to be a 30mm autocannon, and some Coronet anti-tank missiles. We can go and throw that in, which of course are fire and forget and are capable of defeating reactive armor and active protection systems So they say. Now the next one up is one of my favorites. It's the BMP-T, or the Terminator Tank Support Fighting Vehicle, which is pretty, awesome looking. It's designed for supporting tanks and other armored fighting vehicles in urban areas. So the main fighting power of this thing is 4 Attacker missile launchers and the 2 30mm autocannons. It also has 2 grenade launchers and 1 coaxial 7.62mm machine gun. So this vehicle was built on the T-72 main battle tank chassis. So a pretty heavy fire support vehicle. It'd be awesome to see this come to the game. I think it'd be really fun. Now there is a follow-on to the BMP-T, which is the BMP-T-72 Terminator 2. Now this is a retrofit only package, which gives it some updates. So an additional Terminator that Gaijin could play with. Alright, next up is the Boomerang K-17 Infantry Fighting Vehicle. Now this wheeled vehicle is aimed at replacing the aging BTR family, same way that the Kurganets 25 is aimed at replacing some of the BMP-2s. Now the Boomerang is fitted with a remotely controlled weapon station armed with a 30mm automatic cannon. It also is armed with Coronet anti-tank missiles on either side of the turret, so pretty formidable wheeled vehicle here. Alright, so the last vehicle I'll talk about, and one of my personal favorites, is the BMP-3 series. So the BMP-3M is the one I'm aiming for here, which comes with some pretty new gear. It comes with a new ATGM, the Basnia, which is laser guided. It also has some additional armor added on. It also comes with the Arena E, or the Shatura active protection systems, and some explosive reactive armor is also available for this vehicle. So a really good addition to a solid BMP-3 that we already have. But there's also the BMP-3M Attacker, which is armed with the Attacker ATGM. There's also the BMP-3 Dragoon, and the Dragoon comes in lots of different flavors. So it has an unmanned turret. You could get the 30mm gun with the 100mm. There's also a 57mm gun version, and there's also a 125mm gun version of the BMP-3 Dragoon. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up right here. I told you guys I probably wouldn't get to all of them. I definitely wouldn't get to all of them. So I'm going to flash some notable mentions up here that I didn't get to talk about. But overall, lots of top tier material. And like I said, my list kind of starts from 8.7 and up. I know there's a lot of vehicles before that can probably be added to the game. But that's a whole can of worms that I didn't want to open up here. Maybe at another time, but I prefer to play pretty much from 8.7 up. So that's what interests me. But what do you guys think of the list here? Pretty comprehensive, but if you have anything that you can think of or that you know of that I completely missed that would fit in top tier as well, let me know. And if I didn't name one of your favorite vehicles, I apologize in advance, but I just couldn't get to everything. So excluding some specific nations that don't have much to add anyway, in the wider question here, is Gaijin going to run out of light vehicles? I don't think so anytime soon. I think there's countless derivatives that they're going to be able to pull out of the closet. Once again, thanks for watching. I really appreciate the support, and I will see you guys all in a future video. Thanks again.